Hello, people. It's Sunday morning here in Florida, and it's actually a nice, cool morning. So you gotta take advantage of this shit when you can. I finished a book yesterday, The Guns of August. This book gets referenced all over the place, and I can't believe that I'm in my 60s by the time that I read this thing. This was a wonderful book. This is, the author is this Barbara Tuchman. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I've read one other book by her that's titled A Distant Mirror, and A Distant Mirror is another just absolutely wonderful book. There's one that I'm looking for from her too. It's called Sword and the Bible, or Bible and the Sword. One of those two. I hate ordering books, so I'll probably wait until I just find it. This book was published in 1962, 440 pages, and this book starts like in 1910 and runs through the first month of World War I. A little bit more than the first month. It's just an absolutely wonderful book. Tuchman really researches the shit out of her subject. She must, I have no idea how long it takes her to write a book like this, but she obviously reads people's memoirs and comes up with some just wonderful quotes in here from people, what people thought about each other. It's just very interesting. She goes into a gentleman by the name of Schleifen. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right either, but anybody that's familiar with World War I or World War II will know what the Schleifen plan is. And the Schleifen plan almost works for the Germans. However, I did not know that Schleifen, he's a military historian, obviously. He's a grand strategist. He modeled his plan on the Battle of Cannae. And, it was to be a battle much like Cannae, only half the size of France, with, anybody that's familiar with Cannae knows that, Hannibal put the Gauls in the center as bait for the Romans, and then the wings closed in on the Romans. It was the same thing. He was supposed to have a weak center that would tempt the French to attack the center. Meanwhile, he had this super strong right wing that came through Belgium and then surrounded them. So I have the bottom of 22 and the top of 23, and I can't even remember what this is, and I have odd thing written after that. Schlieffen, having embraced the strategy of decisive battle, pinned Germany's fate to it. He expected France to violate Belgium as soon as Germany's deployment at the Belgian frontier revealed her strategy, and he therefore planned that Germany should do it first and faster. Belgian neutrality must be broken by one side or the other, his thesis ran. Whoever gets there first and occupies Brussels and imposes a war levy of some 1,000 million francs has the upper hand. Okay, the odd thing there is in North America, in the United States, nobody ever says 1,000 million. They say a billion. And I've noticed that in Europe, it goes to 1,000 million, it goes to 10,000 million. They don't say a billion until much, much later. Page 71 and 72. I'm going to read this whole thing, but it's short. Some damn foolish thing in the Balkans, Bismarck had predicted, would ignite the next war. The assassination of the Austrian heir apparent, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, by Serbian nationalists on June 28, 1914, satisfies his condition. Austria-Hungary, with the bellicose frivolity of senile empires, determined to use the occasion to absorb Serbia as she had absorbed Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1909. Russia, on that occasion, weakened by her war with Japan, had been forced to acquiescence by a German ultimatum, followed by the Kaiser's appearance in shining armor, as he put it, at the side of his ally Austria. To avenge that humiliation, and for the sake of her prestige as the major Slav power, Russia was now prepared to put on the shining armor herself. On July 5th, Germany assured Austria that she could count on Germany's faithful support if whatever punitive action she took against Serbia brought her into conflict with Russia. This was the signal that let loose the irresistible onrush of events. On July 23rd, Austria delivered an ultimatum to Serbia. On July 26th, rejected the Serbian reply, although the Kaiser, now nervous, admitted that it dissipates every reason for war. On July 28th, declared war on Serbia. On July 29th, bombarded Belgrade. On that day, Russia mobilized along her Austrian frontier, and on July 30th, both Austria and Russia ordered general mobilization. On July 31st, Germany issued an ultimatum to Russia to demobilize within 12 hours and make us a distinct declaration to that effect. War pressed against every frontier. Suddenly dismayed, governments struggled and twisted to fend it off. It was no use. Agents at frontiers were reporting every cavalry patrol as a deployment to beat the mobilization gun. General staffs, goaded by the relentless timetables, were pounding the table for the signal to move lest their opponents gain an hour's head start. Appalled upon the brink, the chiefs of state, who would be ultimately responsible for their country's fate, attempted to back away, but the pull of military schedules dragged them forward. And that's it. That's how the First World War started. Moltke's refusal is my next note. Before shots were fired in anger, but mobilization had begun, troops were moving towards the frontiers, there was diplomatic efforts to stop this. And the Kaiser at one point goes to Moltke, and this is Moltke the Younger, not Moltke from the Franco-Prussian War. This is that Moltke's son. The Kaiser goes to Moltke and says, "Let's pause." And Moltke just looks at him and says, it can't be done. We cannot, once this machinery gets moving, we can't stop it. So not that you can't lay the whole thing on Moltke's feet, but I just thought that was kind of a weird thing. And I had read about that before. Let's see. My next note is the Belgians. Second paragraph, page 125. The Germans did not expect Belgium to fight, but they do. Second paragraph. The American minister, describing the scene in his diary, tells how he watched the king's 12-year-old heir in his sailor suit, listening with an absorbed face and eyes fixed on his father, and how he wondered, what are the thoughts in that boy's mind? Almost as if he had been granted a glimpse into the future, Mr. Whitlock asked himself, will this scene ever come back to him in after years? And how? When? Under what circumstances? The boy in the sailor suit as Leopold III was to surrender in 1940 to another German invasion. Page 252. Oh, that's not page 252. It's my first weekend with this book. A Saturday and a Sunday, I read 252 pages, that's a lot for me. Yesterday, the day that I finished this book, I read 98 pages. The sleeping staff officer. I didn't mark the page here, but before, this is before Tannenberg. The Russians, this is a thing for military historians. The Russians win a battle in East Prussia, and they are a little bit remiss in their pursuit of a beaten enemy. And the enemy wasn't really beaten all that badly. They retired in good order. But everybody makes a big deal out of this guy. It's the staff officer that asks permission from the general, Samsonov, to take a nap. Jeez, I'm already at 10 minutes. And Samsonov says, yes, but do not take your clothes off. Later on, Samsonov wakes the guy up and says, you can go ahead and take your clothes off. The Germans are retiring. And everybody makes a big deal out of it, that the Germans are retiring. You should be following them, not taking a rest. And I compare that to Grouchy and the Strawberries after the Battle of Ligny. Everybody makes a big deal about Grouchy stopping in a Belgian house to sit and eat strawberries when he should have been pursuing Blücher. Third and fourth paragraph, page 282. It's kind of a jump there. 282. Wonderful maps. Some real nice pictures in here, too, of these guys. Third and fourth. You may be able to save the situation in the East, wrote von Stein. I know no other man in whom I have such absolute trust. He apologized for drawing Ludendorff away from the threshold of a decisive action, which, please God, will be conclusive, but the sacrifice was imperative. Of course you will not be held responsible for what has already happened in the East, but with your energy you can prevent the worst from happening. Ludendorff left within 15 minutes in the staff captain's car. 10 miles from Namur, he drove through Wavre, which only the day before, when I passed through it, had been a peaceful town. Now it was in flames. Here also the populace fired on our troops. And I have second paragraph, 283. During the drive through Belgium, Ludendorff was told by the staff captain that as new commander of the 8th Army OHL, had selected a retired general, but it was not yet known whether he would accept the post. His name was Paul von Beneckendorff und Hindenburg. Ludendorff did not know him. Before leaving Koblenz later that night, he learned that General von Hindenburg had been located, had accepted the post, and would board the train at Hanover next morning at 4 a.m. Of course, Ludendorff and Hindenburg become this gruesome twosome. 306. And this is all right before Tannenberg. Third paragraph. This is just after Tannenberg. Almost with awe, they realized the extent of their victory. The haul of enemy dead and prisoners and captured guns was enormous. 92,000 prisoners were taken, and according to some claims, the count was higher. 60 trains were required to bring them to the rear during the week after the battle. Captured guns were counted variously between 300 and 500 out of the Second Army's total of some 600. Captured horses were driven in herds to corrals hurriedly built to hold them. Although no agreed casualty figure for the dead and missing exists, it was estimated at over 30,000. The 15th and the 13th Corps, by capture or death, were wiped out of existence. 50 officers and 2,100 men of these two corps were all that escaped. Survivors of the two flank corps, the 6th and the 1st, which retired earliest, amounted to about a division each, and of the 23rd Corps to about a brigade. Of course, Tannenberg was important because Germany was fighting a battle on two fronts. And this gigantic victory over the Russians allowed them to concentrate on the Western Front. Although they did move troops from the west to the east and did not bring them back in time. So even though the Russians lost that, it was a sacrifice not made in vain. The Marne, von Kluck turning his flank to Paris, turning his right flank, it may not have been as successful for the French had the Germans not moved those troops back to the east. Bottom of 307, top of 308. To the public, the savior of East Prussia was the nominal commander, Hindenburg. The elderly general, dragged from retirement in his old blue uniform, was transformed into a titan by the victory. The triumph in East Prussia, lauded and heralded even beyond its true proportions, fastened the Hindenburg myth upon Germany. Not even Hoffman's sly malice could penetrate it. When, as chief of staff on the Eastern Front later in the war, he would take visitors over the field of Tannenberg, Hoffman would tell them, "This is where the field marshal slept before the battle. Here is where he slept after the battle. Here is where he slept during the battle." And I've read that before. It was really Ludendorff's plan. And even this guy Prittwitz, that Moltke famously calls a fat idiot, Prittwitz already had some of this plan in place. Hindenburg gets all the credit for it. Bottom of 305, top of 306. So I have to go backwards here. This is about Samsonov. And you know what? I'm not going to read the whole thing. Samsonov, he was the defeated Russian general. And he was not inept or anything, but he's surrounded in the woods trying to make his way back to the Russian border. And his staff is worried because he's talked about killing himself already. And in the middle of the night, he does. He wanders away, and they hear a rifle shot or a pistol shot, and Samsonov kills himself. The Germans actually allow Samsonov's widow to come and get the body and bring it back. And then I have Perfidious Albion written down here. Perfidious is a word that doesn't really get used anymore, but it gets used a lot in this book when people are talking about each other. And Perfidious Albion was something that the Germans had on posters when they were trying to raise money to build their fleet. Unfortunately, Jutland does not happen in the first month of the war, so I don't get an account of Jutland here. But they build this gigantic fleet. It's the second largest fleet on Earth, and at that time. And they raise money from the public to build this fleet. It's very expensive to do this. And perfidious means somebody that goes back on their word, somebody that can't be trusted, somebody that breaks treaties. And Albion is an ancient word for Great Britain. And then at the very end, the Germans, did a lot of things in Belgium and France to turn the world against them. They burned down cities and they destroyed some cathedral where a lot of French kings were crowned. And this is the only issue I take with the entire book is Barbara Tuchman says that Clovis is French. And I don't even consider Charlemagne to be French. They spoke German, and Clovis was like 400 years before Charlemagne. They are Franks, and the Franks came from east of the Rhine, not west of the Rhine. They're Germans. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I'm into another book already. I'm about 50 pages in.